have been with us over the past few weeks, you know that during this Epiphany season, which Epiphany just means the light of Christ going out into the world. So it's a season where we're really focused on mission, being the people that God has called us to be, that the fundamental orientation of the church is outward, that we've been radically called in so as to radically go out to proclaim the kingdom. And so during this Epiphany season, we have been going through a sermon series called Proclaiming the Kingdom. And one of the things that we've seen in different areas of our life, whether it's in church planting or in our personal life, that we are called to proclaim the kingdom. And one of the things that we've said is that this is going on in every aspect or sphere of our life, not only in our workplace, but in our neighborhood, our community in which we live, and what we engage in as a church, in church planting, and also how we live our life personally, that we belong fully to God in every area of our life, and that's one of the ways we proclaim the kingdom. Today, we have a special treat because Dave Runyon, who is a close friend over the course of about 9 years or so, that's when I got to know him, when he was he was a co-founder and director of a thing called City Unite, which brings together other churches around the city for the purpose of unity, so that there's not hundreds and thousands of churches in the city, but we say that there's one church, and it's the Church of Jesus Christ, and it's his name that we lift up. And so Dave was leading that initiative, and also we have just been able to benefit it from here because we have a ministry called Unite Inglewood, which does the same thing, brings together churches to lift up the name that is above every name. Dave also engages in businesses and identifying how can businesses more fully participate in mission and reaching out. And so he's currently doing that now. It is a great gift that we have him here this morning to talk on a particular area of life of how we can proclaim the kingdom. So I want to invite Dave up. One of the things I really appreciate about Dave is not only his winsomeness, but also he doesn't take himself too seriously, but he takes the kingdom of God extremely seriously. And we are blessed here as a community to have him this morning. So let's pray for our brother. We thank you, Jesus, for Dave, and we want to pray, God, your blessing over him. We thank you for the ministry that you have entrusted to him over these past number of years. We thank you, Lord, for his passion for the church, his love for the people of God. And we want to pray, Lord, that as he comes and shares what you have been leaning into him over the past few years, that, Lord, our hearts will be opened, that we will be changed and transformed. And that, God, that even as you're doing that internally inside of our hearts, that you're also doing that externally as we more fully engage the community that you've planted us in. We pray your blessing over Dave. It's in your name, Christ, we pray. Amen. Amen.
Thanks, Billy. Good morning, Wellspring.
Good morning.
It's good to be back here. It's been a while. I think it was about 4 years ago or so since I was here. So I'm excited to be back. I've been listening online over the last few weeks as Billy's been sharing about this idea of proclaiming the kingdom. And we've been asking the why question. Why do I exist? Why do I work at the place where I work? Why am I married? Why am I single? Why does Wellspring spend so much time and energy planting churches in this city? And this morning, we're going to ask this question. Why do I live in the place that I live in? And I'd invite you to kind of think for a moment about why do you live where you live? What were the factors that went into making that decision? You got them in your head? You think of them? Okay. I don't think that's actually why you live where you live. And I think Paul has something to say about this. The text that we just read a few minutes ago is found in Acts chapter 17. It's one of my favorite passages in the Bible. And Paul is in Athens, and he's talking to this group of people. He had been wandering around the city earlier. He noticed a number of different idols that they had. And he finds this idol that's to the unknown God. They've got so many idols that they actually make an idol to the unknown God. Now, Paul has a number of options that he can take as he approaches this group of people, right? He can condemn them. He can try to pile up all the idols into one place and light them on fire. That's not what he does. He uses this idol as a bridge to begin to talk to people about the one true God. He looks at me and he says, listen, I can tell you're a bunch of religious people. Let me tell you about this God who you do not yet know. And he launches into this incredible sermon about the character and the nature of God. And in this sermon, he says this, from one man, he made every nation of men that they should inhabit the whole earth. And he, so God, determined the time set for them in the exact places where they should live. God did this so that men would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. Let me summarize this for you. You don't live in the place that you live for the reasons you think you do. It's not because you always wanted to have 4 bedrooms up, okay? It's not because this is the school district that you really wanted to be in. It's not because you can't really live or afford to live in the place that you want to be in or should be in. You live in the place where you live because God has placed you right there. And he's placed the people around you there as well, so that when they reach out for God, and I love the posture that is implied here, so that when they reach out for God, they'll have handles to grab onto. If you believe this text, if you let this sink in, it will change the way you view your neighborhood. It'll give you eyes to see something is sacred that's going on right in your apartment complex, right in your ranch, right? I don't think a lot of ranchers are here, so but right in your single-family home, okay? I don't care who you are. If you're in this room today, you have neighbors. You have neighbors. And if you give yourself to this is something, by the way, it's not just in this one passage in Acts. This idea that there's this robust theology of place that permeates both the New and the Old Testament. And if you give yourself to this, it'll change you. It'll open up a whole new world, a whole new network of relationships that you likely don't have right now. Where we live matters to God. Countries and nations matter to God. Cities matter to God. Our neighborhoods and how we engage in those neighborhoods matter to God. And the truth is this: most of us, myself included, most of us do not have a strong, solid theology of place. Most Christians do not really believe that there's something sacred happening on their block. And I know this because of my own personal story. For much of my life, I didn't have a thick theology of place, but then something happened to me that changed the trajectory of my life. I served as a pastor for about 10 years in Arvada. And something incredible happened in our community. We, the pastors and faith leaders in that city, about 20 of us, we actually became friends. Like in the busyness of all that people do that are in ministry or leading a church, somehow, some way, a group of us became friends. And we started to hang out together, and we started to pray together, and we started to dream together. And we started to ask, well, I wonder what it looks like for the church, the Big C church, to really function like they're on the same team in Arvada, in our city. And as we started to think about that, we started to think about, making the kingdom tangible, both proclaiming and demonstrating the kingdom in our city. We realized that we didn't know what's the smartest thing the church could do in our community. You ever thought about that? If you were going to mobilize the church of Inglewood or the church wherever you live, what's the smartest thing that the church could do to really make the kingdom tangible in your community? And we didn't know the answer to that, which, by the way, is an indictment on you if you're a pastor, and you actually don't know your city well enough to be able to answer that question. And so we started to create these conversations with local government leaders. So we would bring in the city manager, we would bring in the police chief. About 8 years ago, we're sitting in the room with our mayor. We've got these, the lead pastors and a couple priests from 22 different congregations in our city. We're sitting in this room, and whenever we'd have these community conversations, we'd always ask 2 questions. We'd ask them, what's your dream for our city? And if you could wave a magic wand and change something, what would you change? And so we have to, we tell them what we're going to ask them, so they're not terrified of what's going to happen in the room with a bunch of, weird pastors. Okay, so our mayor at that time was Bob Free. We're sitting in this room, and when we ask him the magic wand question, he pulls out this piece of paper, and he had written down all of the things where he felt, all the areas where he felt stuck, where he felt like the government system was stuck and didn't really have the answer or the resources to figure it out. And so he starts to read down this list, and he says, I want to live in a city where there's no financial debt. I want to live in a city where there's no single moms that live below the poverty line, where there's no at-risk kids, where there's no elderly shut-ins. And he just goes all the way down. There's 11 different things on this list. He reads them all to us. They're all really good. They're all like that. there was actually some like weird ones on there. He's like, we need a better newspaper. We're like, this is the wrong room for that. So he reads all of these down, and then he takes this piece of paper and he puts it away, and just very much in passing, he says this. He says, if you guys want to have like a really big impact in our community, you should start some kind of a neighboring movement with all of the people that show up to your churches. And then he just goes on, and we're like, no, go back to that. What do you mean? He starts to describe that what they're learning at the city level is that the closer people are in relationship in their neighborhoods, the less weight there is on all the systems that the local government is trying to provide for people in need. He said, there's a lot of kids who are missing a parental figure in their home, and they're struggling. Now, we can start another Boys and Girls Club, which costs millions of dollars, or that kid could live on a block in an apartment complex where people are connected and where other healthy families are bringing that kid into the fabric and the life of their family unit. We can start another program for elderly shut-ins, or that person who's growing older and more isolated could live on a block where his or her neighbors know them and care about them and are meeting many of their needs. And he said this beautiful line. He said, what we're learning at the city level is that relationships always trump programs. That relationships always trump programs. Now, I want you to imagine what it would feel like if you made your living, like as a pastor, helping people orient their lives around the text. Now just imagine that's what you do for a living. Now imagine what it feels like when God uses your mayor to tell you that the smartest thing you can do for your city is the thing that Jesus said matters most. You know what I mean? Like that love your neighbor thing. Our mayor's saying, going, hey, now he didn't understand how horrible it was what he was doing to us. He had no clue. He was saying, like, you guys should do the Bible. You all those people, and go do the Bible. I think it would really make a big difference in our city. It was horrible. It's like getting punched in the gut, and I'm also sitting there and go, I needed to hear this. I needed to hear this. And so he leaves, and we decide, hey, let's pray for 2 months about what we're supposed to do with this. And we all made a commitment not to go like, this doesn't happen at your church, but in other churches, anytime something interesting happens to the lead pastor, it becomes like a sermon series the next week. So we were like, we all made a commitment not to do that, and so we're just going to pray. And I'll never forget, I'm driving home from that meeting. I'm driving back into my cul-de-sac, my little loop that I live on, and there's like 100 thoughts going through my head. The 2 of them that I can remember right now are this. I thought to myself, Jesus is smart. Like that was like a big idea for me as a pastor. But I think, no, wait, like Jesus is smart. Like what if when Jesus gets asked to boil the entire text down to one thing, is it possible that in answering that question, that in the Great Commandment, is it possible that Jesus gave us a really simple strategic plan that if every believer did it, it would change the world overnight? That was my first thought. My second thought was this. I'm driving back into my neighborhood. I'm going, oh my goodness, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. Now, I was involved in a lot of good things. I was sitting on the boards of 3 different nonprofits at that time. As a pastor, I'm trying to help people figure out their marriages and their life with their kids. I was creating these outreach events at our church, like just keeping my fingers crossed, praying that like somehow somebody that didn't know God might like walk in to our event. So I was like busy doing a lot of good things. I wasn't just like sitting around like binge watching Netflix. I did that too, but I was doing a lot of good things, but I was putting almost zero intentionality into building relationships with the people right around me. I had filled up my time with a lot of other things that I had chosen to do. And truth be told, like, I was thirsting for something else. Like, my world had started to grow. My networks, my friendships had started to look very, very similar to one another. And so I went into the house, and I told my wife, Lauren, what had happened at the meeting with the mayor. My wife's been ahead of me on, like, most things in life, including this idea of, like, literal neighboring. And she just looked at me and said, so what are you going to do about that? What are you going to do? And I didn't want to lock myself into anything that was going to like look like a lot of accountability. And so I told her, I was like, I'm going to spend more time than I do right now in the front yard for a year. For a year. Now, in doing that, what I didn't realize is I was saying, I'm going to be more present. I'm going to be more interruptible than I am right now. In just doing that one simple thing, in just being out in the front yard more, that one little thing totally screwed up my whole life. Because I started to take one step and then the next step, and God started to open up a door here, and then close one here, and then open up 3 more there. And after a year, I had started down this road towards all these new relationships with people that I used to just wave at. And these people were people that some of them, I didn't have much in common with. And it was awkward at the start. But as I continued to push through and lean in, what I realized is a lot of them had passions and interests and assets in places where I had voids, and vice versa. And what I started to realize is the way that Jesus talks about living, it's actually the best way to live. It actually is the best way to live. I'll tell you a little bit more about what's happened in my neighborhood here in a few minutes. Let me tell you what happened with my pastor friends and I. So we decided that we're going to pray for 2 months. We come back and we meet again. And there was this one lady, our assistant city manager. Her name is Vicki Ryer. And I had been annoying people with that magic wand question in the city for a couple years, and she would always say the same thing. She'd go, hey, Dave, you know what you should do with all those people that show up to all those churches? The next time it snows, get them to shovel their neighbor's driveway. And when she would tell me that, this is before the mayor conversation, I would just think to myself, no, that's not it. I wanted something really, I wanted something sexy. I was envisioning this newspaper headline. It's the Church of Arvada eradicates homelessness forever, or something like that. And so the idea of neighboring, but when the mayor said it, I just go, oh, Vicki's been trying to tell me this the whole time. And at the end of it, so Vicki comes in and just talks about how crime rates are impacted by neighboring, how long people live is impacting by neighboring. When there's a crisis, a natural disaster, your neighbors are always your first responders because the systems get overwhelmed. We're all listening to her going, yes, that's good, that's good. And we're thinking the whole time, and Jesus said to do this. And then at the very end, she's a Q&A with one of the pastors. She says something that just cements for us, that just built this conviction inside of us that we had to do something. And she wasn't trying to be mean, but she looked at this pastor. She goes, hey, you don't think from where we sit at the city level that we can see a difference in the way Christians and non-Christians treat their actual neighbors, do you? It felt so horrible to hear somebody say that we started to argue with her about her perception. And then I stopped. And I realized, she's right. And by the way, I've shared her quote in rooms with leaders from over 500 plus cities. Never once has a civic leader come up to me and said, oh, Dave, in Inglewood, the Christians are the best neighbors. It's not even close. Okay? Now think about that. How do we reconcile the fact that God says if you only do one thing, love God with everything you have and love your neighbor as yourself, how do we reconcile that with the fact that, in our cities, in our country, in our culture, there isn't a drastic, noticeable difference in the way Christians and non-Christians treat their literal neighbors? How do we make sense of that? How did we get so off track? And I started to think about that question. I started to get really irritated. I was like, yeah, that's not, you ever see this? I'm sure this hasn't happened to you recently at all. You see something on the news and it makes you mad? Okay? That was the emotion I was experiencing when I started to ask that question. Then I started to ask a different question that changed my mood and my temperament. I started to ask this question. I wonder how you end up as a pastor who's not engaged in his own neighborhood. And I went from being irritated and angry to really reflective and pretty convicted. And I started to read through the text with a new lens. I started to read passages that I had taught multiple sermons on, that I had read hundreds of times, and they started to take on a whole new light. And one of them is our gospel reading today. I still remember reading through this and just having the words jump off the page at me, especially the part at the end here. So If you have a Bible, you can open it up to Luke 10. If you've been around church for a while, there's a chance that, like me, you're inoculated to what we're getting ready to read. And so I want to ask that you look at it with fresh eyes through this lens of literal neighboring. Luke 10:25. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he asked, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" "What is written in the law?" he replied. "How do you read it?" Okay, this happens a couple times in the Gospels. The person comes up and asks Jesus a question. He knows that's not what's going on here, so he gets the person to answer their own question. That's what happens. So he answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." "You've answered correctly," Jesus replied. "Do this, and you will live." Think about how powerful just that. Do this, and you will live. But look at this little phrase here in verse 29. This is the part that just came screaming off the page at me. But he wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" But he wanted to justify himself. This guy goes to Jesus, asks a really straightforward question. He gives the textbook, straightforward answer. And this guy's first thought is, how do I get out of this? Where's my loophole? But in order to justify himself, he asks Jesus, "Jesus, neighbor, what does that really mean?" How he does it is fascinating, right? His first thought is, I wonder if I can define that word neighbor in a way that most easily fits into what I'm already up to. I wonder if I can define that word neighbor so that it most easily fits in to what I'm already up to. Do you want to know how you can become a pastor who's not engaged in his own neighborhood? You have to just be just like this guy. Just define the word neighbor as you see fit so it matches up really well with the things that you choose to live out. Do you want to know how we can become a group of people who aren't known as some of the best neighbors on our block? All you have to do is just do this little mental gymnastics move and get to a place where you're choosing who your neighbors are. And I want to tell you, if you're willing to actually confront this and unravel it, it's going to totally screw up your whole life. You're going to end up like me, actually starting to think that Jesus might have meant our actual neighbors too. Now, let me tell you how you can get out of this, okay? If you don't want to screw up your life, if you don't want to take this literally serious, here's how you can get out of the idea of loving your actual neighbors. You just need to make it into kind of a metaphor, okay? Make the whole idea of neighboring nice and big and kind of vague and distant, okay? And you just want to have a metaphoric love for your metaphoric neighbor, okay? And metaphorically, you're just going to be killing it. All right? And in real life, you're going to be sleeping 30, 40, 50 feet away from people who you don't even know their names. I know this because I did this. So here's how I did it. Because what happens here in this story is Jesus goes, "Oh, we're going to play the let's define the neighbor game, huh?" And he just blows the definition of neighbor up on this guy. He tells the story of the Good Samaritan. And the story of the Good Samaritan, the big idea of the story of the Good Samaritan is that everybody is your neighbor, right? No, that's not the big idea of the story of the Good Samaritan. That's what I thought for most of my life. I thought, yeah, everybody's my neighbor. What the story of the Good Samaritan says is, when you care for the person in front of you, no matter who's doing the caring or who's being cared for, okay, that is an act of loving your neighbor. That's a big difference than everybody's my neighbor. So what I did is I thought to myself, everybody's my neighbor. And by the way, when everybody's your neighbor, lots of times nobody is, but everybody's my neighbor, right? And I can just kind of choose how I'm going to live this out based on what I'm drawn to, what I drift towards. Now, here's what's happening in the story. Jesus is giving this guy the AP version of loving your neighbor. This is graduate school loving your neighbor, what he's doing here. He's assuming that this guy is loving the people of his same culture and customs, okay? So he's taking him farther down the line. But what I've come to realize is that I didn't need AP neighboring. I needed to actually go back to kindergarten because there was a lot of people that were around me who I didn't even know their names. I had met them all multiple times. They just weren't important enough for me to remember their name. And so going back to kindergarten means we as believers, we rediscover our theology base. We draw a circle around the place where God has put us, and we begin to work out from there. And I'm just going to tell you, as we do this, as we lean in this, as we just take the next small step with the people that are right around us, the kingdom breaks out. The kingdom will begin to break out. And I also want to tell you this, that there's a big difference between affinity-based relationships and proximity-based relationships. And part of the genius of this idea of taking the idea of loving your neighbor literally and seriously is that proximity-based relationships are really different than the ones that we drift towards. Affinity-based relationships are those relationships that we just kind of I like hanging out with that person. I'm going to hang out with them more, okay? Or that's the small group. I like those people. They're a lot of fun. That's the small group that I want to be in. Those are affinity-based relationships are great. For the majority of my life, almost all of my relationships were affinity-based relationships. Okay, and by the way, so a lot of them looked really similar. I ended up hanging out with a lot of people who love sports, have an unhealthy obsession with sports, who are funny and who are rich. Okay, if you leave me to my own devices and just let me drift towards people, that's who I'll end up with. Because I like to laugh a lot, and so I want to be around people that make me laugh. And I love talking about sports, and so I want to be around people. And then somewhere along the line, I learned that if you hang out with rich people, it's like you're rich for a day. You just get to use all their stuff, okay? I'm getting some stuff out here. It's a confessional moment. Okay, now, you start basing relationships on proximity. Also, affinity-based relationships, I end up hanging out with people who think about the world really similarly to myself. Now, you start basing relationships on, if you give yourself to the discipline of being open to proximity-based relationships, all of a sudden, you're hanging out with people who think about the world totally differently than you do. I mean, I'm guaranteed, if you're struggling with being in some Christian subculture bubble, just start hanging out with your neighbors. Okay? It's the antidote to living in some Christian, subculture weird thing. Okay? I start to hang out with my neighbors. There are different seasons of life. They have different interests. I have friends now that don't like sports. Super weird. But they love things and are passionate about things that I don't know about either. And it's awkward in there for a while. You have to lean into some of those relationships and get through that. But I'm telling you, if you come out the other side, what you end up with is you end up with these friendships in which other people's passions and interests actually fill in some of the voids in your own life. My neighbor across the street, his lawn looks like it's off of the fairway of a golf course. My lawn doesn't look like that at all. And so one day I was looking at him just going, hey, help me make sense of what yours and mine look like. What do you do over there? And he just came alive. I just asked one little question. He just came alive. And he took me all the way from January all the way to December. And he starts describing every single thing he does throughout the course of the year to get his lawn to look like that. And I remember thinking to myself, that's totally not worth it. But it was him talking passionately for 10 minutes, and there was something beautiful that happens when you get to know somebody who has other interests than yours. You get to share the things that we love, and I get to share the things that I love with him, like sports and Jesus and our kids and why I do the things that I do, and I get to hear those from him as well. And so that's why I really believe that Jesus is smart. That if we start to give ourselves to actually taking the second of the Great Commandment literally and seriously, that the kingdom begins to break out in the places that we live. Now, I want to tell you a few things here. I'll give you a few tips in some moments of confession. Some of my neighbors don't want to be my friend. They're super busy. And they like come home from work and they grab their kids, and then they like gotta go like 4 different activities, and then they grab fast food on the way home. They come back and and their garage door goes up, and then it goes down, and then they detox from everything they went through that day, and then they wake up the next day and they do it over again. And they just don't have time or a desire to be friends with my wife or I or our kids. And I have a lot of grace for that, because I think that's the way my neighbors experienced me for much of my life. But some of my neighbors are dying for something else. They're dying for something that's just a little bit below the surface. Most of my neighbors, all they have is like their, surfacey stuff at work that they talk about, and then the dysfunctional stuff we all have in our family of origins. And that's it. And I think in the back of my mind that I was driving past them all the time, thinking, well, surely that person, if something really matters, or they have someone that they really connect with. And the truth is, most of them don't. And just simply being the kinds of people that live on our blocks, the kind of people that say, hey, what are you even learning about parenting lately? Why did you decide to become, an engineer? Just being those kinds of people makes a huge, huge difference. Makes a really big difference. Now, I want to say this. I know there's a lot of you in this room, you're hearing this thought about taking the second half of the Great Commandment literally and seriously, and you're thinking right now to yourself, and maybe you're like, actually, you know the Bible really well, and you might be thinking to yourself, Dave, I don't think you're exegeting that correctly, because I spend more time at work than I do at home. And what I'm doing there with those work relationships is neighboring. Or, I'm really passionate about what's going on with the Denver Rescue Mission, and what I'm doing there is neighboring, or the relationships that you're building with the parents on your kids' sports team, whatever it is. And I want to be really, really clear about something. All of that, of course, all of that is loving our neighbor. I don't want to diminish that. I don't want to dismiss any of that at all. In Jesus' economy, clearly, that is loving your neighbor. But here's the deal. All of that doesn't somehow sprinkle magic fairy dust over your actual neighbors, and all of a sudden Jesus wasn't talking about them. Jesus meant our actual neighbors too. He meant our actual neighbors too. And when we begin to lean towards that, when we begin just to take the next small step, you'll be shocked at what happens as a result. Not with all of them, but with some. As you begin to say, it's not okay that I've met that person 3 times and I don't remember their name. I'm going to go and have a mildly awkward conversation to remedy this. That couple that we've been saying that we're going to have over for 2 years, what if you actually asked them to come over? That kid who kind of lingers around your place, right? What if you just were out in your front yard and you lingered as well? This is what it looks like to proclaim the gospel in the places where God has put us. And I want to tell you, I love what this church is up to. Wellspring has a phenomenal reputation in our city. An amazing reputation. And one of the things that makes that you guys so unique is the way that you've been so committed to going out and to caring for the renewal of our city by planting churches. And what you continue to do that. It's been a gift to our city. It's one of the smartest things that a church can do to proclaim the kingdom. And you know what another really smart thing is that as every single one of you walks out here today, and you drive back into the place that God has placed you, that you begin to think about your own personal mission, your own home or apartment, whatever it is, your own place where you currently sleep at night. You begin to think about that through the lens of the kingdom. And I just want to encourage you, in neighboring, the small things matter. Remembering somebody's name is the difference between somebody being a stranger or an acquaintance. Okay? Leaning in, asking, for something, to borrow something, there's a big, big thing that happens when reciprocal relationships are two-way street relationships. Go out, serve your neighbor, look for ways to do that, but more importantly, figure out ways that you have needs of your own that could be met by the person across the street. And I want to close our time by just asking and inviting you to pray this really dangerous prayer. And it goes like this: God, what's the next small step that you want me to take with one person who lives around me? And so we're just going to take 30 or 60 seconds here to just get quiet before God and to just listen. And I don't know what it looks like when you listen to God. I don't know if it's just for me, a lot of times it's a nudge or it's a thought. I just have to get still enough. I just have to get still enough to be able to be open to hearing him. And so if you would, just bow your heads and pray with me. God, in this moment, right here, we're asking you to speak to us. Or you give us a thought. Help us to hear you. God, what's the next small step that you want me to take with one person who lives nearby? Amen. My prayer is that something really specific came to mind for you. And so as you leave here today, as you go back in to your neighborhood, I want to encourage you to make a commitment to begin to live out the thing that Jesus said matters most. And my gut, my hunch, is that what happened to me will start to happen to you. And if it does, this will be a place that continues to have an incredible impact in this city. And I want to encourage you. I want you to know that what you're up to is the real deal. And I have a lot of hope for the people in this room to take a really simple concept like this and for it to become really potent, because it's something that the leadership here really believes in and that they're living out in their own lives. So Billy, thanks. It's an honor to be here.